Although for me, what Yolanda, Carmen, and Jacobo have just done what they have done is objectively beautiful. Someone in the room could disagree. It is harmonious, symmetrical, moving, soothing. Welcome to the sound of beauty. The concept of beauty is one of the most subjective that exists, and it depends as much on the object that embodies it as on the individual who perceives it. The idea of beauty varies according to the historical period, culture, or personal taste. For Plato, it is a manifestation of the world of ideas, a reflection of the divine. For Aristotle, it is order, proportion, and symmetry. In the Middle Ages, the connection with God is reaffirmed. The Renaissance begins to link it to art and nature, culminating in humanism with the realistic representation of human beings and their natural surroundings. Immanuel Kant speaks of subjective beauty. In his view, aesthetic judgment should not be based on personal interests, but on a disinterested appreciation of form. During the 19th and 20th centuries, the relationship between art, beauty, and human existence is absolute. Today, beauty can be anything. The concept is inclusive and diverse in the broadest sense of these words. Plato's quote in the PowerPoint, "Beauty is the splendor of truth," is profoundly inspiring. For him, beauty reveals the truth of its deepest and most perfect essence. He associates it with the term splendor, a radiance emanating from something deeper. It is as if truth illuminates the world, and beauty is the light that we perceive. I would like to emphasize this relationship between beauty and truth to connect it with one of the qualities of vocal beauty that I will discuss later. It is uniqueness, considering voice as the direct expression of our being. Without authenticity, beauty loses its strongest pillars and fades away. This path leads to subjectivity as the guiding concept of contemporary society, where individuals decide based on their own criteria what is beautiful and what is not. The reasoning can become very complex as there are some individuals who have more influence than others when it comes to judging beauty. What gives them this sensitivity or special talent? God? Their nature, which is so more exquisite than others? Being someone cultivated and full of knowledge? All of it together? In arts, beauty is perceived beyond aesthetic terms as the capacity of a work to evoke deep emotions, communicate complex ideas, and offer transcendental experiences. It is not the purpose of this talk to analyze the various current aesthetic trends in music, which would require weeks of discussion. The concept of beauty in music has changed radically in the 20th and 21st centuries. Atonality, serialism, dissonance, minimalism, repetition, composers like John Cage, who introduce chants and everyday noises into their music, transgression, silence, a crucible reflecting the complexity of modern societies, where beauty is a fluid and multifaceted concept that must adapt to a rapidly changing reality. Although the transmission of emotion theoretically remains one of the highest values of beauty today, the professional world of musical performance, especially in instruments, places enormous importance on technical perfection, devoid of any other subjective or expressive considerations. In a seemingly free world where anything appears to be allowed, there are rigid cliches about how music should be performed, what parameters give value to a performer, and what fits within the style and what does not. Freedom and subjectivity live in a prison of very fine bars called perfectionism, with technology and the precision achieved through recordings as its primary mentor. Among professionals dedicated to singing, we find at least two major groups: classical or operatic singers and popular singers. They differ in aspects such as vocal qualities and endurance, the way they use articulators and resonators, their interpretative freedom, and the theoretical training required. Now, we will talk about the qualities of the voice considered beautiful. The first one is timbre. Timbre depends on the harmonics that accompany the main note, and it is a personal quality of the voice that, much like facial features are to our face. In the voice, timbre is largely depending on the structure of the Morgagni ventricles, the pharynx, the nasal cavities, and the resonators that reinforce certain harmonics over others. Vocal technique enhances its dark or light color and achieves a brighter or more matte voice. The combination of timbre and tessitura provides the voice classification in operatic singing we all know, which is soprano, mezzo-soprano, contralto, tenor, baritone bass, and then with all the surnames like lyric, lyric light, dramatic, etc. A clear example of timbre modification through vocal technique is the covering of the sound, which emerged at the beginning of the 19th century due to the need to use the full voice in the higher register, especially for the tenor voice. Stylistic demands, technical virtuosity, and the volume needed to project over increasingly powerful orchestras accelerated this evolution, balancing the sound in certain tessituras with the coveted homogeneity. Vibrato is a regular and controlled oscillation in pitch and sometimes in amplitude of a sustained note. A voice with a balanced and beautiful natural vibrato is well ahead. It is frequent to hear praises for vibrato as one of the most important qualities of a beautiful sound, even in instruments. There is a certain personal touch, the way tension is controlled, the type of sensibility one possesses, the ability to convey emotion, in short, multiple aspects that are less controllable and more genuine to the individual, which contribute to this characteristic of sound that gives it beauty, emotion, color, and dynamism. Articulation is the mechanical aspect of speech, the movement we make with the mouth cavity and lips to pronounce and transition from one syllable to another. Good articulation allows for better breath control, reduces vocal fatigue, and makes the voice more resonant. The bel canto technique is a wonderful example of the balance and proportion between breath and articulation. Diction, on the other hand, is the more or less aesthetic way of articulating or pronouncing words. Diction lies between the articulation that supports it and the interpretation it serves. Good diction enhances the key words in a phrase or the syllables of a word. Intonation refers to the ability to produce the correct note frequencies and is essential for a voice to be considered beautiful. Part of this ability is inherent to the performer, while another very important part is related to technique. Some singers, even while using incorrect technique or lacking formal training, are perfectly in tune, However, others are unaware that they lose pitch accuracy. Singers must train their ear to detect even the smallest fluctuations in pitch. String instrument players are particularly skilled in this area. Practicing ear training as they do can be very beneficial for singers. A voice is adaptable in two ways. Technically, it is flexible and elastic, and musically, it is capable of serving the composer's requirements, the style, the expressive and virtuoso demands. A brief list of what the voice adapts to could be to the varied repertoire in terms of style and eras, to different emotions to interpret a wide range of characters, and the voice also adapts dynamically by modifying volume and intensity. Thus, the capacity for adaptation is fundamental and is part of both the beautiful voice and the talented artist. Breath control. Breath control is the fundamental pillar of vocal technique. We are all born knowing how to breathe, since it is one of the hegemonic functions of the human body. However, this natural action has to adapt twice. Firstly, to the demands of a secondary function such as vocalization, and secondly, to the development of a technique that allows us to obtain beauty, resistance, power, duration, and ductility. The type of technique used to manage the air will determine the way in which we can handle the different parts of the articulatory and vocal systems. And yes, there are many, many ways of teaching breathing technique, almost as many as there are individuals who carry it out. The physical, emotional, instinctive, and mental condition of each individual are different. Hence, the system used has to be adapted. Even so, there are a series of common principles that will need to be agreed upon, known, and mastered. Expressiveness is the bridge between technique and emotion. A beautiful voice is capable of demonstrating genuine passion, sincerity of feelings, and the nobility of the authentic. Despite this enormous importance given to the transmission of emotion and the connection with oneself and with others, the focus of attention during the learning of musicians in general is only placed on expression very occasionally in the studies. In the classroom, when I talk about the importance of communicating with authenticity, students often ask if they should move their hands. No. It is not a question of putting on a sad face or touching one's heart in a phrase of love. No. It has to do with something deeper, something that we will never be able to let flow if we can't face ourselves, if we do not delve into what each musical phrase wants to say, beyond the words, or even through them. If we agree that technique is a means to achieve something that is above it and that has more to do with art, genuineness, and the ability to emote and be emoted, we must act accordingly, reflect, and work on it. Operatic singing is anything but natural. What Carmen has done, those moving phrases of Manon, Violeta, or Rodolfo, naturally appear exquisitely tuned, with infinite breaths and a perfect legato, charged with emotion, with eternal high notes that make your hand stand on end, and agility that is impossible due to its speed and length. No, classical singing is not natural, just as ballet or rhythmic gymnastics with balls, hoops, ribbons, or ropes are not. Being a classical singer requires years of preparation and a lifetime of practice and improvement. The technique must give us almost total control. That is why it is so important to achieve and maintain it. However, there is a place beyond that, which some artists come to, when they manage to reach naturalness and flow with music and expression. This feeling may be described of mind, body, soul union. It is very particular when it happens. A beautiful voice is singular and unique. In classical singing, singularity is sometimes not a quality directly attributed to beauty of the sound. In fact, one of the important differences between operatic technique and other types of singing is the enormous work that is done to achieve a homogeneous timbre in all its registers. Equality is not singular. However, taking this into account, in my definition of beautiful sound, genuine personality is among the most important characteristics. Homogeneity of timbre does not have to be opposed to the variety of emotions. Today's society tends to equalize with the perverse promise of being different while wanting to make us all the same. Huge contradiction. I often have the feeling that nowadays voices and musicians in general sound very similar, with exceptions, of course. Singers like Maria Callas or Luciano Pavarotti were easily distinguishable by just singing a few notes. The voice is our fingerprint, and beauty also resides in difference. I am not saying that being different is a sufficient quality in itself to bring beauty, but I do think that uniqueness and personality are essential to consider a voice beautiful. And we return to the idea of truth linked to beauty. Individuality, personal interpretation, the perfection of one's own is authenticity and depth. It is truth. It is beauty. Finally, I will talk about the main qualities singers must have to reach the maximum beauty of their voices. These qualities complement each other no matter how many compartments we create to understand the greatness of the processes. The magic is that we function as an indivisible whole that is nourished by the idea of unity. For sounding beautifully, it will be necessary to possess a quality instrument, be musically and culturally trained, have a good vocal technique, innate musical talent, a captivating personality, and ease of communication. And I would like to add one more quality which I didn't put in the PowerPoint, which is very important. It is discipline, a must which you always have to have if the thing requires work. There will be individuals in whom some of these characteristics will be innate. The musician who, without knowing why, has a natural ability to interpret a phrase in style, musically impeccable and capable of moving, will always have a special magnetism. In general, it is frequent to find two profiles of singer students who, although they seem very different, have a peculiar meeting point. On the one hand, there are the impulsive ones who let themselves be carried away by their temperament. During the time dedicated to studying, they sing one piece after another without asking themselves any questions. They do not work on the melodies, the details, how to start a word, which syllable to emphasize, the legato. They only repeat the most risky fragments over and over again. Why, you probably wonder. They defend that singing has to be natural. They trust in their abilities and think that any conscious process hinders their creativity. The second singers would be the conscientious ones, who seek to have everything under control and rely on repetition and analysis, leaving aside spontaneity, inspiration, or some originality. They blame any setback on their instrument, the weather or the food, even on the teacher. In both positions, the voice, the music, and the singers themselves are dangerously harmed. This training requires patience, resistance to frustration, and large doses of honesty. Only a genuine love for music would be an appropriate motivation for dedicating your life to this wonderful profession, which is not a bed of roses. For singers, to acquire an effective and healthy vocal technique is non-negotiable. This talk is too short to tell you about my way of seeing technique. For me, it is a living process of listening, reflection, and opinion. There are different schools, indications that may seem more accurate than others. However, nothing can be compared to listening live. The ear and intuition of a good teacher is unique and non-transferable. If the teacher is important, much more are the students. Once their technique is established, they are ready to draw from various sources of knowledge in order to create a unique way of singing linked to their own personality. For teachers, generosity, knowing how to let go of ties, and appreciating talent and good results, even if they are not the direct consequence of their own teaching, is the most valuable learning to accompanying young musicians in their attainment of the precious sound of beauty. The classical singer turns singing into art, and singing is the voice of the soul. It does not admit falsehoods, and individuality does not accept being denied. Learning to sing can be an authentic path to personal realization that will allow for those who seek to find themselves and make their inner beauty vibrate. I have chosen to call my speech The Sound of Beauty because although our subject is the human voice, beautiful can be the sound of any instrument that plays music. I don't know if the voice is the most perfect instrument that exists. The voice is oneself, and precisely for that reason, perhaps it is not more perfect than a violin, an oboe, or a piano. Its advantage is that it is part of our essence, and the fascination it causes, especially when it is beautiful, is extraordinary. The human voice captivates me, but the one I am really and deeply in love with is the music it serves. Bravo, Jacobo. I am very grateful that you have taken the time to listen to my words. I want to thank so much Dr. Alfonso Barragan, always a source of inspiration. I could listen to his words for 1,000 years. And I want to thank from the bottom of my heart to Jacobo, Yolanda, and Carmen for their invaluable help.